You are listening to Governance 360, a Link Group podcast hosted by me, Lindsey Doud. Hello everyone, I'm delighted to welcome you to the next Link podcast, and I'm joined today by our Head of Industry, Jay Baker, together with our share plan expert, Tristan Adams. The subject for today is age of engagement, and really we're going to be focusing on efforts made by companies to engage with their employees and shareholders. This has really become increasingly under the spotlight with the environment of regulation and corporate governance in which we're operating in, and really an effort by companies not just to take the standard approach of engaging particularly with their shareholders during scheduled events such as AGMs, analyst calls and public announcements, and really to try and expand the engagement which they have with both their individual and institutional shareholders. So I'm going to ask Tristan, please, to kick us off today.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lindsay. Last week, on the 3rd of October, we as in Link attended the annual ProShare Conference. For those of you who aren't familiar with the ProShare Conference, it's an event where plan issuers, plan administrators and advisors attend, and I believe there was in the region of 350 people in attendance. One of the main ideas of the conference is to share best practice on what's happening within the world of share plans today and also tomorrow. Jay Baker, Head of Industry, and Michael Kemper, Chief Operating Officer, ran through the topic of 2019 AGM season, the good, the bad and the ugly. And I'd just like to ask Jay how that went and what topics were ran through.
Thank you, Tristan, and thank you, Lindsay, for having me on this podcast. Yes, the good, the bad and the ugly of the 2019 AGM season. We're fortunate enough to be invited to talk about that very subject at the ProShare Conference. And one of the things we wanted to do was to highlight not just the shareholder engagement in AGMs, but actually what the employee engagement is like. So we ran through a set of slides just highlighting first what the shareholder engagement was like, and what we're often finding in shareholder proxy appointments is that from a registered shareholder point of view, only about 6% of shareholders actually record or register a proxy appointment, whether that's via paper means or Crest or via the internet. When we actually did a deep dive of what's happening in the SIP world, the share incentive plan world, that figure actually reduces to about 3%. So 3% engagement of employees. And why is that? Which is one of the questions we were asking. Why would employees be less engaged than their registered shareholder counterparts? So that was our main focus of our presentation. And we asked some questions of the audience there. One being, why do you think that may be? Very little input from the audience on why they believed there was such a difference. And for us, we think that the question of anonymity for employees might be one that's holding employees back from voting. An employee probably doesn't want to be seen voting against the chairman's reappointment or the chief exec's remuneration. So we see that as a possible failure. And I think as well, are we providing employees with the best infrastructure to be able to register a proxy appointment in the future? Is the web solution the only solution for them? So we discussed how else digitisation of shareholdings will help not just shareholders but employees to record proxy appointments and to engage with companies.
So, Jay, just picking up on one of your comments there, do we have any sort of further information or detail or feeling about why employees might not be engaged?
It's a very difficult question, and one that we've toiled over for some time. I think the anonymity, trying to say that is often quite difficult. The anonymity question, I think, is relevant. I also wonder whether companies are engaging with their employees enough.
Yeah.
The AGM comes about just once a year, and if you're receiving just that invitation once a year to participate, is that enough for an employee to say, do you know, I will record a vote during my busy workload, or is it a question of
Are there any learnings that we could pick up from ordinary shareholdings and how companies engage with them that might then be able to be carried over to the world of share plans possibly?
Well, the world is changing for registered shareholders, and of course most of the shares held in the registered world are going to be held in corporate, pension funds and nominee positions. So when it comes to voting, the retail shareholder, that 6%, for example, includes the corporate and the retail holders. Heavily retail, but very small number of shares are represented because the big votes are with the pension funds and the corporates. And I wonder if that also translates into that employee position. But what's changing there is there are additional voting routes. So for the corporates, at least, there's the Quest route. So that's the voting via the CSD arrangement. And there's new voting infrastructure coming at the end of this year via a company called Proximity. That's going to be live across the UK at the end of this year, and it's already gone live in Australia, and with aspirations to go live across Europe and the rest of the world in the next couple of years. So that's changing the way that the retail, not the retail shareholders, rather the registered shareholders are voting. But the same advantage is not available to the employees. The employees have one route to vote. Generally, it's via the internet. Quite uncommon now is the paper route.
So we're thinking potentially there some of the mediums that are available to people might actually be a barrier in their own right.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think that there's a lack of choice for retail shareholders and for employees alike. That will change in time with the advent of digitisation or new digitisation, if you like, with the advent of new applications and apps on smartphones. We are starting to look at robotics within our call centres. So a shareholder could now, or an employee could now, call the call centre and go through their choices of voting via the phone in a robotic way, if you like, without talking to a human being, and have their vote registered very, very quickly. And there's other solutions that could also come about too, whether it's SMS or even just a straight email or social media. How can we use social media feeds to engage more? And it's not just engagement one way. I've said this before to lots of companies. Don't consider engagement as being one-way traffic. It needs to be two-way. So how can you encourage that second-way traffic back to you via voting or whatever the event may be? Yeah.
There does appear to be a growing interest in employee representation on company boards. Do you have a view or a feeling as to whether that might influence voting interest across those clients?
Well, I think it will. We've just seen the appointment of 2 directors at Capita, for example. So 2 employees are on the board there as employee members of that board, which I think is great. I expect we're going to see some more of that. There's an awful lot of press comment about board representation or employee representation on the board. And I think the attitudes have considerably changed over the last couple of years. Will an employee on a board influence other employees to engage more? I think the answer to that is yes. My hope is that it's yes. But we need to see more people or more employees on many more boards.
Yeah, gotcha. Do we think that the kind of resolutions that are being presented ahead of general meetings are impacting the levels of voting? So, for example, if there was a particularly topical resolution, are we seeing a high degree of voting there?
It's a very, very good question. It largely depends on the company. I think if you... and I don't want to name companies here, but there are certain retailers, for example, that would probably receive more engagement as a result of being a retail brand. A small manufacturer in Carlisle or Bristol, wherever it may be, might not receive the same type of engagement. Probably because the makeup of the register will be slightly different, naturally, where the company is constituent in the listing regime.
So we're actually thinking the industry might also impact or influence the voting take-up.
I think so. What we have found, and it is pretty consistent through our analysis this year, and actually during 2018 too, is that the registered shareholders, it's about 6%, 5.97 this year, 5.8 in 2018 are voting. And that's, when you consider that 6% means 94% of proxy cards are going into waste or into the bin. That's pretty shocking, and more so for employees. So the engagement isn't there. I agree that it is when it comes to the custodians or rather the pension funds, but not enough is being done for the retail holders and those small holders represented by employees.
So, Jay, I've sat in on various conversations over time, and I have heard that not all client companies actually promote or offer voting to their employee shareholders under a share plan. Do you think there will be a growing drive as we go forward to almost make that compulsory?
I think there will, and that will be driven largely by the Shareholder Rights Directive. So SRD2, as it's known, becomes live in the UK from September next year, 2020. And as part of the Shareholder Rights Directive, one of the aims of SRD2 is to create this transparency within the shareholding chain. Now, an employee within a share incentive plan is not a directly registered shareholder, but nonetheless has a holding within the company via that trust arrangement. So yes, I think it will become incumbent on companies to ensure that all investors, all stakeholders in that company, all investee stakeholders, at least should try and should be allowed to participate, should be invited to participate. So I think we probably will see an increase in employee engagement in that regard. Whether they vote, whether they actually engaged as an employee, remains to be seen. But I would hope that they would.
Yeah, good. And on a related theme, we're effectively talking about those that are in a share incentive plan. If an individual's in a share save, of course, because they are not a shareholder until they've exercised and appear on the ordinary register, under the normal voting regime mechanics, they wouldn't have a voice on that front.
Not within the SAYE, you're absolutely right. It's only upon exercise and they come onto the register, then they have that exercisable right to be able to participate within the decision-making process at the AGM.
So there's potentially some work to be done there as individuals migrate from being in a share plan to then appearing on the ordinary share register as a shareholder in their own right.
Yeah, I think the retail question is an interesting one. Why are there shareholders on the register, individual shareholders on the register? Now, most of those are people that have made an investment decision to invest. Most people do that via their ISAs and PEP arrangements. Employees, on the other hand, see this as a great opportunity to invest in the company in which they work without real, perhaps, understanding of what the end result is. And becoming a shareholder in the company, what does that actually mean? And I wonder if companies could do a better job, and I don't know whether enough is being done, to educate the employees that participate in SIPs, to educate them as to what the outcome is going to be. What does it mean to be a shareholder? What are my rights? What am I expected to do? What will I receive? And many employees who become shareholders, I guess, get inundated with stuff through the post because they might not have registered to engage in electronic communications, as an example, and all of a sudden they're receiving a report and accounts, they're receiving a dividend check for small value, large value, who knows. They might have received a share certificate. what do I do with that? That might be the only investment they've got, and I just wonder if we could educate those people more, would we see better engagement backwards?
Is it worth at this point then summarising some of the sort of next steps for companies to think about going forward? The sort of the takeaways.
I think that's what for us here at Link. What's very important for us is the future digital world. We've got dematerialisation coming at some point in our future. 2023, 2025. But ahead of that, what we're trying to do here is create a more dynamic digital solution for shareholders and employees. And we're already seeing that bear fruit. So between 2018 and 2019, there's been an increase in web voting, for example, up from 3.3% in 2018 up to 9.2% in 2019. So a big increase in shareholders engaging via the internet. We've seen an increase in Quest voting, up from 63% up to 67.5%. So again, that's great news for the pension funds and the custodians and nominees of this world. And vice versa, paper has shrunk from 33% usage in 2018 down to about 23.5% in 2019. So we're already seeing the reliance on paper going and the increase in digital taking over. And paper has been declining for some time in terms of usage. So our message to companies is embrace the digital. And that's what we're trying to do with all of our clients, to become more digital and allow their shareholders and employees to exercise their rights via alternative methods.
So we've heard a lot there, Jay, about how e-communications and digital can support individuals when voting.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether this fits into the wider piece as far as greater awareness of individuals about financial education and what they're signing up to.
The problem is that the education piece, I think, would need to fall onto each of the issuer companies that are running the schemes. Now, that, and I say the problem there is it's a matter of resource. Are the companies sufficiently resourced in order to be able to provide that education piece, or is that something us as registrars and share plan agents and administrators are in a good place to do? I'd like to think it's a combination of the two. We are in a unique position to be able to advise our clients on the best way to educate their employees in relation to these. In relation to shares and share plans. And I think we should be doing a lot more of that with our companies and clients in order that they can pass that information on to their employees in a cost-efficient mechanism and on a regular basis. So rather than leave it to the AGM piece or the share release piece, to actually do something a bit more regularly via intranet sites and or other communication channels, linking back into us, and we stand ready to help. It goes back to the point I was making earlier. These investors, these employee investors, this might be their only share investment, and I question whether they have sufficient knowledge in order to be able to understand exactly what's needed of them in the future, whether it's voting at AGMs or perhaps a general meeting that comes up, or what if the company is subject to a takeover. We can help them understand all of these questions much earlier in the game, and I would hope with that regular communication from the company direct, shareholders are going to be, or employees and shareholders are going to be in a better place to understand what they need to do in the future.
Jay, so I'm just wondering whether there is any best practice which is being undertaken on the ordinary share register world, which could then carry over to the world of share plans. And as an example, holding shares in a company, I can register upon the company's website to receive videos and updates on their annual report and accounts and similar.
Yeah.
Do we think that is travelling across to the world of share plans?
I'm not sure. That's a very good question, Tristan. What we see in the ordinary world or the ordinary register world, companies are required to make RNS announcements, for example. So every relevant material change or material announcement has to be routed through an RNS announcement, and shareholders generally, not all retail shareholders, but all the custodians most certainly, and the pension funds and sophisticated investors will be linked into those RNS announcements. So they're getting up to the minute news via RNS and other news feeds. The single holder, retail holders, and the employee holders might not even be aware that RNS even exists. And these are very easy to set up, and you get an email bulletin to confirm that an announcement's been made, and hey presto, you're getting that information at the same time as everyone else. And I just wonder if companies could do more to educate shareholders about those feeds, or to invite the shareholders and or employees to click on a link on their own websites to it. Lots and lots of companies do that. Click here for more information. Is there enough being done at the employee level to educate the employees to go and do that? And I'm not sure that there is.
Yeah, because I guess some of this partly comes down to the company's view on share plan participants becoming an ordinary shareholder. So, for example, is it for the company to make the employees aware of where they can get more information, or is it for individuals to self-serve?
Again, another great question. I'd like to think it's for the company to say to its employees, we've got these great schemes available to you, tax advantage schemes. This means that you'll become a stakeholder and an investor in the company. And why not tell them more? Explain what being an investor is all about. These are your resources that are available to you. These are the links within the intranet site that will take you to the registrar's portal or to a broking site or to a share dealing site. Once you become a shareholder, this is what else you can do. And once you become a shareholder, this is what else will happen. We'll declare dividends from time to time. You'll receive a cheque in the post. Unless you register a mandate to have your dividends paid electronically, you will receive an invitation to participate in the AGM and to vote via proxy. What does that mean? To explain those processes and procedures and keep them available always online within the intranet site or whatever resource you have at your company. I think that employees will become much more familiar with it, rather than just, as I said before, just receiving a share certificate in the post when the SIP. When you withdraw from the SIP, what do I do with that? And as I say, if that's just your sole share investment, it can be difficult and daunting to deal with those investments.
Well, I'd like to thank both Joe and Tristan very much for that very interesting and thought-provoking discussion on engagement.
Thank you, Lindsey.
Thank you.
So I think we can see that the journey from shareholder to employee through to share plan participant and the engagement required is still evolving. It's very much a watch this space. What I took away from that is that there are various triggers for this. First of all, we have the reactive standpoint, which is with the introduction of SRD2 and the transparency required around that, so that companies are going to be giving a lot of thought to how they can engage their shareholders and their employees. There are obviously some great proactive developments in the market space around digital, and Joe, that was very interesting to hear further what we actually in Link are doing in this space, which is certainly going to help with engagement and transparency, and I look forward to hearing more about that. But also that there are certainly some companies out there who are doing great work to actively engage with their employees and their shareholders, and actually looking at how they can develop this past just the usual engagement points of the AGMs, or when there is a crisis, or meetings with investors that are specifically diarised, and really how you can look for opportunities to increase the level of communication. So as I said at the beginning of the summary, really, this is a very much an evolving and developing area, and we'd be delighted to hear from you, our clients and companies listening to us, if you're doing anything particularly innovative, or if you have any data around how your policies are helping to increase the level of engagement of your shareholders. Please do get in touch. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for listening. Check out the podcast description for more information on this episode's guests and presenters. And if you want to get in touch with any of us, we'd love to hear from you.